Welcome to our listeners. In this episode, we are talking with Ian Fletcher, Scallop fisherman from Oban. Hi, Ian.
Hi, Jim. Thanks very much for having me. I hope you don't expect me to introduce myself in the way Skipnish introduced herself with singing to you.
No, we'll let you away with singing to us. Where did it all begin for you, Ian?
Well, I was 16 and I was about to leave school. I had a job in a local restaurant. I was doing a bit of commie chefing, so I could do a little bit of cooking and I knew how to scrub pots and wash dishes and that. I would have liked to have been a joiner or a mechanic. That's what I was kind of interested in at the time. And my father was a good friend of John McAllister's, and he was buying a newer boat, a bigger boat, and he was looking for a 16-year-old school leaver to join as a cook on the boat. So my father bought me welly boots, and away I went. And 46 years later, he's still my boss, believe it or not. That must be some kind of record, I think.
For me, Ian, that speaks a lot about both of you because there's obviously loyalty there. He sees you as a good employee and you obviously see him as a good boss.
Well, he is a good boss, Jim. I mean, he's... Don't get me wrong, it's not easy plain sailing all the time, but he's not an easy man to please. He's a hard grafter. He expects a lot, but he's a very kind person, Jim. He's a kind boss, I would say. Hard to please, but a very kind boss. And his bark's a lot worse than his bite, I would say.
Would you maybe say, yeah, maybe hard to please, but that's because he's got a very high bar. The bar set very high for himself as well, because he puts a lot of work into his business.
Yeah, well, when I worked on the deck with him, Jim, he was a grafter for sure. He's worked hard and he deserves everything he's got. He wasn't handed a penny, you know. He's earned it all and he works hard and he still does to this day. He's at the end of the phone 24 hours a day.
I class him as a real close friend of mine, and for many years I was involved with, but we had boats fishing up and down the west coast, right from Ireland up to the northwest. And depending on where they were fishing, if they wanted to go into a harbour that they had never been in before, I would speak to John McAllister and he would give me the tidal situation. He would say the depth of water, watch this port or watch that port when you're going in at half tide. What a knowledge that man had. It's almost like he had an encyclopedic map of Scotland in his head.
Yeah, well, nothing much has changed there. It's still the same. Oh, yeah.
Well, that does say a lot about both of you. But I know you well enough as well, Ian, and I know you put a lot into it yourself, and not because of your boss. I think that's the person you are.
Oh, well, but probably the way I was brought up, babe. That's the way I was brought up, I suppose, Jim. I came from a farming background and life was tough in the farm. And I don't know how my mother and father fed and clothed us, to be perfectly honest. It was a tough gig. And then when I left school and started fishing, we'd sold the farm at that point. My first wage, £210. It was like huge money, you know. This was in a half share as well, remember. So, you know, a couple of years later, I would get twice that much, you know. So once I was 18, I got into a full share.
How would that compare to an average shore job at that time?
Well, my friend at the time, he was an apprentice mechanic and he had 74 quid, I think it was, for his 2 week in the garage, and I had 210. That was my very first pay. As I remember, the fishing wasn't all that great. We still had a really amazing pay, you know, but the price of scallops is relatively high in these days, I think, compared to the price of fuel, whereas it's a big difference in that nowadays. And expenses are colossal nowadays because the price of everything's got up. Even our food, things like simple things like food. Our food bill for a week at sea now is like 600 quid, 800 quid maybe. John will probably say, put another couple of hundred onto that some weeks. Things like that. It's expensive nowadays. But yeah, came from humble beginnings, Jim, and it was nice to start earning a decent wage, I can assure you.
But obviously a real success story. How long were you cook on the boat? How did it progressed to you now skipper?
Cook for 11, I remember 11 years anyway, and I think end up becoming more the engineer, and then because there was someone else, a younger lad or something, came aboard to start cooking or whatever. It was 1993 I became the skipper. My first job was skipper in 1993. Put on a stone and weight the first year.
Are you blaming the fact that you were a skipper or you were off the deck by then?
Well, I was off the deck, Jim, that was it.
How would you describe the actual work on deck now compared to when you started? Is there still a lot of manual work or is it automated?
Well, there's still a lot of work, Jim, don't get me wrong, but I mean, it's nothing like we used to do because you've got conveyor belts to move all the stuff and put everything back over the side again. So basically all you have to do is sort of sift through the moving pile and take the scallops out, measure them and wash them and put them away. Back in the day we used to have to shovel it all. And that was hard work.
Scallops wouldn't be that easy to pick up in a shuffle, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, it was hard work for sure, Jim. It was good money, all right.
But it's a bit unfortunate that because, okay, no disrespect to a joiner or the trades that you mentioned, but they're not risking their life the way you are.
Well, yeah, I know, Jim, but it's dangerous for sure. But it's only as dangerous as you make it as well. You have to be aware of the situations you're in and act accordingly. Don't do anything stupid because it is a dangerous place. And scallop dredging is dangerous. You know, there's heavy chains swinging about and what have you. So we need to be very, very aware and very careful. But it's much safer nowadays in the modern boat. Much safer. Everyone stands out the way and hydraulics do everything, you know. You just hook the gear in and it empties by itself. It's much safer than it used to be.
So technology really has improved the fisherman's life.
Oh, dramatically. Back then, when I was the first boat started, you didn't have a shower, a toilet, you know, you didn't have electrics. Well, you didn't have an electric toaster, for example, you know, or electric cookers or fridges. Nowadays, with Galley, I put my own kitchen to shame. You know, it's got every electrical appliance you can wish for. American-style fridge, freezer, and everything. Microwaves, Ninja fryers, slow cooker, fast cooker. You name it, Jim, it's there. Wi-Fi that's 3 times as fast as your house.
That'll make it a safer environment when you're not using. I can remember when I was a kid going to see with my father, the stove was coal burning.
All right. Well, it was gas in my younger days. So it was all gas, right? But it's all electric now. So yes, gas. Well, we do have gas alarms and all that, right enough now. So, but electric is safer, I suppose. Yes. Although I prefer a gas cooker cooking on.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And when you say about your father knowing John, was your father involved in the fishing industry?
No, he was a farmer, Jim. He was a farmer, and I was brought up on a farm, and then I was about 14, I think, or something like that. We sold the farm, we moved into town, and John and my father became friends, and that was it. I went away to sea.
So have you been really scallop fishing all your life?
Scallop fishing the whole time, Jim. Whole time. But yeah, I mean, that was I was 16 years old, started. Learned how to smoke then. Got a row off the men for nicking their fat. Well, I didn't really nick them, but I was begging for cigarettes, and then I was forced, I had to into buying my own because I learned how to drink as well. A funny story, Jim, we were in landing one night and we didn't have the night off and what have you, and so I was invited up for a couple of pints, so I think I had maybe 3 pints of heavy shandy, and they had to take me back to the boat, you know. So we're back at the boat and I was lying in my bunk, fully clothed, room spinning, not in a good place. And the men are sitting there having their tea and toast and what have you. I can remember sensing that they were stuffing a half-pound of butter down the back of my trousers. I couldn't do anything about it. So that was fine. Anyway, I woke up about 3 in the morning and my 3 pints of heavy shandy were wanting out. So I was upstairs to go to the toilet and then realised what had happened. You know, this packet of butter had melted. So it was just like my bits were well buttered, you could say. And then in these days, I can't remember normally you had a sea bag at sea with clothes, but on that occasion, I think we were supposed to go back into Oban that night. But anyway, we didn't. We went away somewhere else. And then, so I didn't have a change of clothes either. So after a couple of days, the butter started to go off that I had melted. So, just imagine the smell. So, yeah. So that was that. I got a wee lesson to not get drunk, suffer the consequences.
So is that the initiation ceremony for a scallop fisherman?
I think maybe that was it, Jim. Aye. I think maybe that was it. So, but yeah, when you were working with men, you soon grew up,
Yeah.
You had to get on with it. And I learned a lot back then. They were great guys, taught me everything I knew. You learned how to splice and what have you.
You're taking me back there to when I was younger, and you went from a half shear to a full shear after you learned to mend.
Right.
And because usually it took long enough with a mend a net properly, by the time it took you to do that, you had learned pretty much everything else.
Yeah.
But do you not feel... Sorry,
Jim, what were you going to say?
I was going to ask you, do you feel with a fisherman, what is his work role? It can't be just one job.
Well, it's all jobs, Jim. When you start, well, maybe different nowadays, but when you started at sea back then, you were the cook. The youngest one was the cook. So you learned how to cook, and then if you became after a few years, maybe became the engineer or the mate or something, and another new boy would come on the scene and he would be the cook. But I was actually the cook for 11 years, as I remember. A lot of people don't like cooking, so they try to get out of cooking in the boat. But I quite enjoyed cooking, Jim, and apart from when the weather was bad, I couldn't stand it then, but that was just, you had to put up with it.
And when you were at sea, was cooking the catch an option?
Sometimes, yeah. If we ran out of sausages, we would fry scallops for breakfast, so quite often I'd fry scallops with bacon and eggs for breakfast. And these days, we 3 square meals a day, full work every morning for breakfast, and then lunchtime it was pie and beans or something like that, and then nighttime proper dinner, mince and tatties, steak and chips, whatever. It's not the same like that anymore for some reason. Not our job anyway,
Yeah, but would you not say that although you were maybe eating more then than you are now at sea, you had much more manual work?
Oh, absolutely, Jim. Yeah. What's that? We've got conveyor belts and hydraulic systems to move the catch now for you. But back then we had to shovel it, and it'd be fair to say that we were pretty fit and strong back then. It didn't do us any harm.
You must feel, when you're talking about starting in 78, you must have seen a lot of changes in the job over that number of years.
I would say so, Jim. A lot of changes in technology and scallop dredge design as well. But a lot of modifications there. Tried many different new dredges to try and be better for the environment and the seabed and have less contact seabed and all the rest. Spent thousands trying different types of fishing gear, trying to modify our gear and trying to improve it, And we've had some good gear, fish well but don't last, things like that. They can catch scallops, but then they wear out too quickly and they're not viable, things like that. But we've spent a lot of time and money trying to improve our methods, and some worked really well.
It's maybe a message that doesn't get, that a lot of people ashore are maybe not aware of.
Well, probably not, Jim, but I don't know if all scallop fishermen do that or not. But I mean, I used to always try and design a better dredge, when it was fished better. But then you design the perfect dredge, that's not a good thing either, because you can't catch too much either. You have to be able to leave some for tomorrow. If it's too efficient, that wouldn't be a good thing either. In one sense, it's because you could end up cleaning your grounds up too much. At the moment, the dredges are not very efficient, but whether a more efficient dredge would perhaps have less effect on the environment, or it would maybe have too negative an effect on the scallop stocks if it caught too many. It's a difficult one, a fine line.
I notice, I have to say, having had many scallops from yourselves in the restaurant, it was always noticeable to me that I never, from any of you scallop boats, I've never had an undersized scallop. Never. And I've had some from divers from different places. And depending on the person, I would have maybe, there would be some undersized. And I used to always feel, well, I know we've spoken about it, and a diver, the undersized scallop, is dependent on his integrity and honesty and greed. Whereas you don't have an option because you don't even catch them.
Well, we do. Well, the very small ones get through our gear, yes, but we do catch undersized scallops, yes. So we have measures on board. We have to measure them very carefully. Yeah. So we have the ability to keep small scallops for sure, but there's sizes that we have to stick by. Different sizes all around the UK. So we have different sizes that we have to abide by, laws that we have to abide by. But I think scallops, we all recognise that the undersized scallops are tomorrow's scallops, so I don't know anybody that would actually intentionally keep them, to be perfectly honest. Accidents can happen, but the undersized ones always go back. We used to put the wee ones back. Before there was a minimum landing size, we always chucked the little ones back. And these days we use the handle of the basket as a gauge. But then I think that wasn't 100 mil. It was like, I think it was 96 mil or something. But that was before there was a minimum landing size regulation. I mean, even then we put the small ones back. We recognised that was tomorrow's catch. But it's policed now. I mean, we've got our scallops measured regularly. Fishery officers are waiting. The boats are boarding us all the time, and so we get regular checks. So it's not something that's I would never chance doing. Put it that way. It's landing undersized scallops.
Well, that's interesting. I don't think they're ever boarding or checking a diver.
No. Well, I mean, he could say that he's taking them in and putting them in a safe haven or something. I've heard of some divers that I don't know, they call it ranching or something like that. So they take them and put them in a little safe haven, secret spot till they grow larger. Which, well, that sounds a good idea. But what happened to the scallop bed that they took them from? They've decimated the scallop bed. Didn't leave any. Need to leave the little ones for tomorrow where they were. So that's not a good thing if they're doing that.
So there could be clearing the natural habitat where that scallops are area. Is that right?
They could be taking all the scallops off their natural grounds, yes. They've said themselves to take them and ranch them and put them in a safe haven. Our small ones, as soon as we start sorting our catch, the undersized ones go back over the side, back where they came from. They're back in the sea within 5 or 10 minutes usually. But supposedly, well, it's reckoned they've got a survival rate of something like 95%, so it's quite a high survival rate. So it's an around interest to put the little ones back.
It's really quite interesting because I can understand the diver would put them into an area where it would actually be not better for the scallop, but easier for him to access them. Shallower water.
Yeah. I don't have issues with diving. We don't fish in the same grounds, but some divers seem to have issues with scallop dredgers, even though we don't fish in the same waters. And they go on about the damage that a scallop dredger is supposed to do, and I think they all forget that the seabed recovers. I've been fishing the same grounds, Jim, catching similar amounts for 46 years. You don't hear of many divers who've been fishing the same grounds for 46 years that I know of. I've heard one or two going out of business. Why is that?
That's a very clear message. I mean, 46 years. And I take it it's about your ethos that when you're fishing, as you said, you're putting small ones back and into where they've come from. So the grounds are recovering and the seabed's recovering.
Well, I mean, we kind of rotate our grounds, Jim. You don't go out and fish the same bit every day. Fish pretty much all around the UK. So try to rotate our grounds and leave them as long as possible. Hopefully the same little patch I would like to leave for at least a year. And provided no one else has found that little patch, hopefully when I go back in a year's time, there will be scallops. Sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't. It's just the way it is. Sometimes I've seen me go into bits where we've had good fishings, and I know nobody else fishes, and perhaps we've not been there for maybe 4 or 5 years, and it's like, well, the tides are right, the weather's good, we're going to give it a go, and you get there and there's no scallops, and it's like, how did that happen? Well, there's some scallops, but nothing like you were expecting. And then there's other times you go somewhere not expecting scallops, and lo and behold, they're like, well, how did that happen? You get scallops. You weren't expecting them. Sometimes these bits are the bits that have been heavily fished. You know, it's amazing. Nature's an amazing thing, how they recover.
Mother Nature, she obviously keeps a few cards close to her chest.
Absolutely, Jim. You know, you can go into the scientists, you know, and I've definitely got time for scientific knowledge and advice and what have you, but you can take all the scientific evidence on the planet about scallops and fishermen's knowledge, the whole lot, but you cannot take into account a curveball from nature. You just can't. So nobody can be absolutely certain how many scallops are going to be there and how many are going to catch. You know, it's just nature, Jim. It's just, and I think sometimes they're scientifically overanalyzed, over-controlled. Some science is good and some science are maybe acting on someone's behalf. So in my opinion, sometimes the data can be flawed to favour a certain angle. I feel that the fishermen aren't, I think, listened to a lot of the time in all jobs, not just scallops, you know.
What you say there about Mother Nature and going into areas sometimes good, sometimes not what you expected, don't you feel environmentalists would have that as overfishing? And you say you'll leave it for 4 or 5 years and it's never been touched, so it can't be overfishing.
Hello, yeah, but I mean, these environmentalists, Jim, to me, they're not charities. Are actually businesses. They're actually acting as charities, and I believe they're acting as charities so that their huge funders can legally offload excess cash to them, you know, and then claim it back themselves as in tax. You know, it's the funding world. It's a dirty, dirty world. I think it's high time HMRC and our government woke up to the fact that what they're trying to do, trying to help the environment, at the same time, they're actually wanting to put hundreds of fishermen out of work who have been fishing sustainably for decades. They're wanting to put hundreds of fishermen out of work. Terrible the way they act. I don't know how they can look at themselves in the mirror, Jim. Some of them, when they speak to their children, and if their children say, "Dad, what do you work at?" "Oh, I try to put hundreds of fishermen out of work." I know that my family and friends are very proud of what I do, Jim, as a fisherman. I go to sea. A lot of the time I don't know where I'm going. Sometimes you've got to take a chance, and you know where you're going to go. You don't know where you're going. You don't know what you're kind of catch. You don't know how much wages you're going to make. But we always seem to pull something out of the bag by the end of the week. And my family are very proud of that, what we've done over the years. And, you know, the environmentalists, they'll go on about damage to creatures. But the problem is, in food production, sadly, some small creatures have to give up their lives. Whether all types of forms of food production, so that we can all enjoy our daily bread, our fruit and vegetables, our scallops, our prawns, or fish, or beer, or whiskey, and that's just nature, Jim, and we're part of that. We try our best to avoid that, I think, in all forms of food production, but no one's come up with the correct answer to that yet.
But that happens on land with farms as well.
That's what I'm saying. All forms of food production. So it's not just fishing, but I mean, these environmentalists are picking fishing because we're the wee guy. I would argue, Jim, that I do more damage cutting my lawn to warm-blooded creatures from a strimmer than I do catching scallops. We do try all forms of food production. I think everyone, you know, the farmers are trying to get the ideal way of pesticides and all the rest of it to try and reduce this and that. You know, fishermen are the same. We're trying to do something, Jim, but you know, it's difficult. We have to remain viable at the same time.
Well, you're talking about pesticides. A farmer might use pesticides, but what's that doing to other creatures?
Well, maybe the eco wars would be better chasing after the governments that are allowing pollution to flow into our seas and do something about that instead of trying to ruin blooming coastal communities, putting fishermen out of work. But the reason they're doing it is, Jim, you know, you're not one day suddenly you realise you're a failed creel fisherman or a failed newspaper reporter. You don't suddenly become an environmentalist out of the goodness of your heart. You become an environmentalist because you're getting heavily funded to do it and you're making a bloody fortune doing it. That's why they're doing it. And in my eyes, that is wrong. There's money laundering might be a bit strong. It's not nice, I don't think.
You get what's classed as a charitable organisation, as you say, to put people out of work, and they get their money from rich, what did you say, philanthropists.
These people like Esme Fairbairn and Pew and these huge green charitable organisations offloading excess cash, call it to a charity. I mean, why is it a charity? Why do they not just say that we're a business, we're this or that?
Because then they pay tax.
Correct.
And also, you get the charitable organisation and look inside and just see what salaries they pay themselves.
More than I make, put it that way. It's all very clever stuff they do. They're just trying to grab the naive public. That's basically what they're doing. The public don't know any better, and they think because they're called this or that what they say is true.
That's right. And as Kenneth McNabb says in a previous podcast, there's no negotiating with them. It's their way or no way.
Their way or the highway. Yeah, absolutely. He's right there.
Yeah. Do you still feel after 46 years, Ian, you get job satisfaction?
Oh, yes, Jim. Oh, yes. Oh, I mean, it's you go to, like I said before, it's like a hunting thing, right? So you go away to see. You don't know what you're going to catch, but it doesn't happen all the time. I can assure you, when the fishing is good. But see when you go out there and you actually are being successful and you're putting all your knowledge, experience to the test, and you find yourself a little hotspot of scallops, and you do really well. The crew are happy. They're up because they know they're going to get a good wage, and everybody's buzzing. And you come in, after a few days with a big haul. It's a great feeling, Jim. It's a great feeling of joy satisfaction. It really is. I think that's why I still do it. And we're out there and the weather's great and the fishing's good and it's a lovely place to be, Jim.
That's fantastic. And really, if we look at it, after 46 years, you're obviously not putting a burden on the environment. So it's a sustainable fishery. And you could say, as you're coming ashore feeling a buzz like that, it's not the last time you're going to feel that way.
Well, I hope not, Jim.
Another point I make, Ian, in all the different methods of fishing and the different species that are caught round our waters, I've never spoken to a fisherman that goes out to sea to catch the last of any species.
No, I don't think so. You'd be doing well if you manage that, but no, no. When the fishing goes down, Jim, you've had your share of an area. You think, right, I'll leave that. You always leave some scallops so that you can come back to it another day. Okay. You can't take the last one off the seabed. There's going to be nothing there for tomorrow. So you always have to sort of, judge. We've worked here for a day now. We'll move on. We'll try a different area. So you move on, try a different bit, and then hopefully try and leave that bit for a year or longer if you can, and hope that no one else finds it, and you can come back to it again. Keep returning to the same grounds.
Ian, the interesting part of hearing you say that you're a fisherman, I know, but you're still very much a hunter.
Well, I suppose it is, Jim, yeah.
And probably the only profession and food source that is actually hunted.
Yeah, I suppose it is, Jim, yeah. Yeah.
In your time, in your 46 years going over that, is there anywhere springs to mind if I was to ask you, where did you catch the most scallops at any one time?
Without giving away too many secrets, Jim. One place that sticks out, and the whole fleet will know about it is the Dogger Bank. Huge abundance of scallops there, enormous, with absolutely enormous fishing there. It was just about, I think it was just about COVID time or just coming out of COVID. So prices were poor because markets weren't opened and But the amount of scallops was, I remember the best day the Summer Rose had, I think he said he had 460 bags for his day, which is like, what was it, about 17,000 kilos or something like that. Would that be right? So 450 bags, that'd be a decent enough week. If you get that every week, you'd be doing okay. But we're getting that in a day, and of course that caused all the boats are doing the same. So that caused a market problem. So we reduced our catch. I think we were actually going out for a couple of days and getting our 300 bags or something like that, and then coming in because the volume of scallops couldn't be handled. But we got out there and getting 200 bags, no problem. And it was when Greenpeace appeared, and basically, as far as I'm aware, the MMO bent over to pressure from Greenpeace and closed the Dogger Bank to mobile gear. So we can no longer fish there. And that area, the Dogger Bank, Jim, is 6,000, I believe the area they closed is 6,800 square miles. And the area, I worked it out in my plotter recently, the area that the scallop boats were fishing in was roughly about 200 square miles, which is something like 3% of the bank. It's a tiny area. They could have easily left us these areas to fish because, the bank, although it's a massive bank, it's the ground isn't suitable for scallops. There's miles, you can steam for hours over the bank and not see any scallop ground. With all the equipment on board the boat, Jim, you can tell the correct type of seabed to shoot your gear on most of the time. Sometimes it looks correct and there's nothing there, of course, but you wouldn't waste your time shooting on most of it because it's a too clean a bottom, Jim. It's not a firm enough bottom. The scallops like a firm kind of gravelly seabed. So there's miles and miles and miles of ground where there's definitely no scallops, and there's 200 square miles where they're knee deep, and we're not allowed to fish there. And now they're going to cover it in windmills, which will have a far bigger environmental disturbance to the seabed than we would ever do, because it's going to cover the whole blooming bank. It's an absolute joke. So it is.
And would I be right in saying, if they were considering the environment, well, the fact that voluntary through the market, you guys were easing down on the effort, on the amount you were catching anyway, so the market was being organically controlled by market forces and possibly weather and things like that as well at certain times. But from what I can read into that, if you're reducing your effort and you're going out 2 days and coming in, you're burning less fuel. So environment's winning, ticking every box.
Well, plus, Jim, it was a new fishing ground, and it would have eased the inshore waters, the pressure on inshore waters as well. Because inshore waters are getting the special squeeze in inshore waters now with wind farms. There's wind farms on every chunk of shallow ground on the east coast of Scotland almost. The pressure that's on us these days to try and find an area to fish that's not getting wind farms built on them is becoming ever greater. And then when you do find a wee patch, it's covered in creels. That's another issue. The creel fishery has exploded over the last couple of decades or so. There's creels away 20, 30, 40 miles off where you'd never seen them before. All the little firm bits are covered in creels. So the creel men, the lobster men, the crab men, it's a similar type of seabed. The scallops and the crabs like a lot of the time it's a similar type of seabed, so we find ourselves in a bit of conflict sometimes with creel fishermen, so. But I mean, that's kind of always been the way, but you've got to work with them. There's no working with them down the east coast. Some of them anyway, they'll just absolutely refuse to move their gear for you because there's nowhere for them to move it to, because there's that many creels. There's nowhere else they can put their creels.
So they've got access to anywhere they want to put a creel, have they?
Yeah, I believe so. And as many as they want as well. As far as I'm aware, there's nothing to stop us putting a hauler in the boat and putting 20,000 creels in the water. And that's been the case but I think they've found out now that they've caught too many crabs over the years, so there's a bit of an issue there as well with sustainability, I believe. So
I'm quite sure the situation I remember, you would probably be involved in it, maybe still are, but I remember often hearing when there was a fishing fleet in Caithness. There's only one whitefish boat here now, but I remember I used to hear lots of fishermen and they would speak to scallop boats, and the scallop boats would come into an area after talking to a fisherman. They would get a good fish in the scallops. They would move on then. In would come the fish boats, and they would get a good fish in a whitefish after the scallop boats had been there. So you're obviously maybe stirring up things and there's food available and fish are coming in. So you're all helping each other and it's not damaging anything.
That's what I would argue. That's as well, Jim. But it's like a farmer harrowing his field, perhaps. I think there's initial some kind of form of damage, I suppose, but I think it starts a new food chain. It creates a new, like a farmer's field. It creates a new life, a new food chain. That's what I believe anyway.
Many a fisherman I've spoken to on both shellfish and whitefish, they reckon maybe a boat's been an area they've been fishing for 10 years ago. There was no fish on it, and that's where they're fishing now. So they get, and then their big bone of contention, they get the survey ships doing trials and sea trials, and they go to the same area every time. And fishermen just don't feel that they're getting the correct results.
Yeah, I know, Jim. I've witnessed that. Years ago, we had scientists out in the boat doing a scallop survey of some kind. I can't remember what it was all about. But I said, well, why do you go to the same... They wanted it all had to be like big, long teeth on our dredges. I said, well, we'll not catch anything there with big, long teeth. You want very, very sharp teeth if you're going to catch anything. But I don't know, it was all about relevance. It wasn't about trying to catch as much as possible. It was, I don't know. He gave me a scientific explanation, which I thought, and then recently not recently, it was 2 or 3 years ago now, I remember watching the Alban Amara, the research boat, doing a scallop survey, and he was up at the Shant Isles, and he went round this. I was watching his moves, tracking him with his radar to see if he had a wee hotspot up his sleeve I wasn't aware of or something. But I watched where he was fishing, and he had a toe in exactly the same place where another scallop boat had been fishing for 2 or 3 days. If he waited on that same toe for 2 or 3 days, he must have gotten a good fishing to stay there for 2 or 3 days. So what the Alban Amara would have seen is definitely not an accurate reflection of what the scallop stocks was on that area. There must have been a good healthy stock there for the scallop boat to wait there for 2 or 3 days. So there's things like that. It's like, but then if Marine Scotland would use the information that they've got all our VMS data, they've got all our e-log information. They know exactly where we've been. They know exactly how much we're catching. To me, it must be like a computer working to sort that out and tell everybody. They then know exactly what the stocks are doing. You don't need any boat to go and do a survey, which is often, in my opinion, flawed because of what I just said about the scallop boat being in the area previous to him. But they've already got all the information. It's the same at any job. They know where the boats are catching cod or whatever, haddock. They've got all that information. I don't know why that's not used and put into like scientific data for whatever. They know exactly where we're fishing. We've got cameras watching us, Jim. We've cameras on board watching us 24 hours a day for something like 10 or 12 years now, watching our every move.
Yeah. And what do you feel about that?
No, it doesn't bother me, Jim. The cameras are there. So they're there to make sure you're not breaking the law. So you don't break the law. It's simple as that.
So am I right when I'm listening to you there, Ian, by your various instruments you have on board, they know where you are. They know what your catch is from where.
Yeah, exactly. They know exactly where we're fishing. They can see where we're fishing on their CCTV. They know exactly with our VMS or satellite positioning. They know exactly where we're fishing. We know exactly what we're fishing. And on our e-log at night, we fill in our e-logs every night and send away the information of our daily catch every day, every night. So they know exactly what we've caught that day. They know exactly where we've been. And they know exactly how many dredges we're towing. because they can see us on CCTV. They have all the information.
So really, it's easy seeing where the buck stops. Marine Scotland.
Aye. Well, I'm not going to say anything too bad, but they'll be chasing me, Jim. They'll be
Well,
hounding me.
yeah, well, that's the unfortunate thing about it. They know that as well. And that's what gets them away with a lot. But I have to say, in a number of my recent podcasts, I've had scientists, and one in particular was saying about how much she enjoys an icy scientist. Now, they're all seen as bad as far as the industry is concerned, but they were telling me how they enjoy the relationship with fishermen. And she actually goes on to say that they feel the information they get from fishermen is better quality than their own scientists. But I've spoken to Scottish fishermen about that, and they say, we don't see that. Well, no, we don't, because she's Holland-based, and she's speaking to Dutch fishermen, whereas Scottish fishermen of Marine Scotland, they get nothing.
Yeah. I don't know, Jim.
Where do you see the industry going forward?
I don't know, Jim, to be honest. It's certainly getting more difficult with the price of fuel and what have you, fishing's becoming very difficult with the price of fuel. And I think it's only the clever fishermen and the good fishermen that are going to survive. That's what I think. Because it's becoming, it was never easy. It was never easy. But it's with the price of fuel and the price of the increase in fishing gear, the increase in everything, Jim. But that's the same in all businesses. Every business is feeling the same pinch. The price of scallops is going to have to go up. We're not getting paid enough for them. We're not getting much more for them than we did when I started at sea,
Is that right?
It's almost right. When I started, I think the price of diesel was like 10 pence a gallon. Now it's 50 pence a litre or more.
Yeah.
So the fuel bill used to be like 600 quid. Now it's blooming 8 grand or whatever it is. So there's a lot of pressure to maintain income, to keep your business afloat.
Well, I hope it sees better times. You mentioned that you did a bit of cooking in your past and chefing. If I was to ask you, you're home, you're going to have a special meal, what would be your choice and favourite?
Probably, Jim, any seafood, but I love a bit of turbot. I love turbot. Simply fried in butter, gently fried in butter. Just love turbot. I love langoustines. I think without any seasoning or sauce, I don't think there can be anything more delicious in the world than a langoustine, I think. And I like scallops too, of course. But I'm so used to scallops, Jim. I've eaten so many. It's not seen as a special occasion to eat them because I've eaten them so often. I've used to have scallop sandwiches, have them fried for breakfast. But now I do enjoy them, probably more cooked with cauliflower puree and all that sort of thing, and perhaps a wee bit of black pudding on the side, which I know you think's wrong, but it all goes quite nicely together.
I would class scallop and black pudding as the 70s prawn cocktail. And as far as accompaniments are concerned, I just don't see it. As we've discussed on the pier and many a time, I would say enjoy this lovely sweet scallop for your tea in the evening and have your black pudding for your breakfast the next morning.
Yeah, we have scallops. Say we're having steak and chips in the boat. Quite often have 2 or 3 scallops along with it. A wee surf and turf, we treat like that. It's nice. I probably enjoy fish more. Turbot's good and halibut's good if you can get halibut. Quite rare.
When you're going around the UK in the course of a year, are you able to monitor and know where they're in season and when they're not?
Scallops, yes, aye, yeah. I mean, for example, at this moment in time, there's boats thinking about going to the Western English Channel, but I believe they're not going there because the quality is very poor. That's just for example. So you're not going to go all that way to fish scallops that are in poor condition, and so you try to keep quality at its best. If the scallops are good quality, you get good money for them.
I feel with that, on any food production, never mind scallop, just any fishing, if we eat everything in season. We're healthier, environment's healthier.
Yeah, I think you're right, Jim. Yeah. That's why your restaurant was, what was it? The sixth most sustainable restaurant on the planet at one point?
That's right, number 6 in the top 10 in the world. Yeah.
That's quite an accolade, that, Jim. Captain's Galley. Very good. It's quite an accolade to have that.
And I have been the first to say we had it using dredged scallops.
Well, it was all about sustainability, Jim, wasn't it? Your ethos. So it was. There could be arguments for eco-friendly scallops if you like, and if people want that, that's fine. But they're going to have to pay 3 times as much for them.
Yeah, but what's eco-friendly?
So, for something that tastes like that, I go, well, that's it exactly, Jim. They say that you've damaged the seabed and all that, but even a hand-dived scallop has got a little environment growing on top of the scallop. Tiny creatures living there. Is it okay to take them out to sea? It seems to be, as far as a diver's concerned, for example. But we are not allowed to remove anything like that,
And what's your views on areas being closed for various reasons?
Well, these MPAs, they claim there's going to be an overspill of scallop spat. Well, I'm waiting for that to happen, and I'm waiting for the proof of it. It's the fifth alarm was closed. I've lost count many years that's been closed now. It's as far as I'm concerned, it hasn't done any good. And what it does do, and what all closed areas do, so if they're closed permanently, that is, all year round, what it does do is cause overfishing elsewhere because the boats have to go somewhere else to fish. For example, down the Sound of Jura there, half of the Sound of Jura is now shut. So therefore, that half that's opened gets fished more intensively than it used to because the north end's all closed. That's for instance, and that's happening all around the country. It's all very well. Close an area, but close it for 6 months and open it again. Why don't they open the first alarm for 6 months or even 3 months? Let the fishermen in, enjoy good fishing, hopefully, and then close it again. Everyone gains. Everyone wins.
But Ian, if I could just pull you up on that just now, the way you're talking about your method of fishing and what you do when you're in an area and then you leave it, you're actually doing that now.
Yeah. But if, say, for example, the Firth of Lorne opened, though, if the fishing was very good, because the area's been closed for, 15 years or whatever it is, it could end up being overfished because every boat on the planet would be there fishing it. So the fishermen themselves would have to come to some sort of arrangement that, no, we don't want to open all year. We want to open just for X amount of months, close it again, rest it. That's how I would like to see it done. Open it for a few months, let the fishermen in to harvest the catch, and then close it. That protects it.
In my time with the podcast series, I've had a fishery scientist, Jon Christensen from Iceland.
Yeah, I listened to his podcast. It's very good.
He's actually said you close an area and the fishing goes down. And he said that's been proved right round the world, time and time again, and from oceans to the lakes in Africa.
I believe that too. I believe that's what happened at the Windsor. I think, as far as I know, I'm not a fisherman as such catching fish, but I've heard that said there's no fish there.
We've also had ICES scientist, Mark Dickie-Colas, head of a department there, so he's obviously respected within the ICES. And I asked him the question, what's your views on closed areas? And his exact words were, if you're going to close an area, you can't just leave it, you've got to monitor it. And you talk about the Firth of Lorne and places like that are closed and at MPAs and that. There's no monitoring there.
No. Well, there is and there isn't, Jim. The large boats are monitored because we have VMS. So fisheries know where we are, but in the past there was a couple of, I don't know how many, I think there was one small boat went in illegally and I don't know if he got caught or not, but he caused a lot of hassle and gave the industry a bad name because he was caught fishing in the MPA. Or I actually don't know if he was caught or not, to be honest, but they were certainly chasing him for long enough. But the big boats couldn't go in there because of our VMS, but I think now all little boats have VMS, and so it makes it more difficult for them to do anything like that. So that's probably a good thing.
But even listening to you, Ian, and saying that you're viewing that as a good thing and as a positive thing, that comes across to me as being very responsible and considerate of the stock.
Well, I suppose, Jim, at the same time, you are trying to catch as much as you can to try and keep yourself afloat and give your crew a decent pay. But at the same time, when you see fishing going down, then, right, let's move on. So you move on to another area.
I see that as responsible fishing, Ian.
Well, I suppose it is responsible, Jim, because I'm thinking of, well, not only am I thinking, well, if I move on, I'll maybe catch more, but I'm also thinking that if I leave that there, I know there's that there, and hopefully in a year's time, there'll be more there again for us, So it's like you try to rest your grounds, I suppose, eh?
And obviously, with the scallop fishing around the country, when it's sustainable and it keeps working, there's obviously not too many, so they're not in any way being overfished. They're being managed.
Well, they've been managed to a certain extent, Jim, for sure, yeah, but some areas do get overfished, Jim. But the reason they get overfished is often because boats have been forced out of their fishing grounds because of MPAs, and it's something we definitely try not to do, is overfish an area. The boat has to remain viable. So when the fishing gets really poor, you can't stay there if there's nothing to catch. So you have to move on and find somewhere where you will catch enough to make your business pay. You can't wait and a bit fish and fish and fish until there's nothing left. Because not only is it devastating the future, you're not going to make any wages this week. You have to move away. You have to move on, find a fresh spot. Can't stay in the same bit if you're not catching anything. Oh, the fishing has gone down.
But you wouldn't, if it was going down and there was overfishing, you wouldn't be going back to the same place next year.
No, not if I could help it, no. But again, with all these areas and the areas being shut down, you end up sometimes being forced back to an area because of areas are closed and weather's poor, and the only place to go is, for example, that area that you didn't want to go to. So you're being forced sometimes to fish where you don't want to fish because you're not going to catch much. It can't be ideal all the time, that's, I suppose.
No, that's a very valid point. And it just asks a question, what thought goes into it when they do decide to close an area?
Well, I don't think they think about the fishermen, put it that way.
I don't know if they think of anybody but themselves.
Exactly.
I don't know what the gain by it. Because through nature, they're just imbalancing.
Well, that's it, Jim, exactly. It's causing an imbalance because they're forcing you to fish where you don't want to fish. Scallop seems to think that he can put out these stupid claims that 95% fishing ground is fished by scallopers. What it should say is it's possible for 95% of the ground to be fished. That's simply not the case. I would say it's more like 5% of the ground is fished. It's a tiny area of the sea. And these areas, because of environmentalists, are becoming smaller because they're getting areas closed. And it's putting more pressure on the ever decreasing size of the scallop grounds. They don't think about that. They think they're protecting an area. What they're doing is actually increasing the effort in other areas. And that's not good.
What would you say in your time as a fisherman in 46 years, what access are you to fishing grounds now that you had then?
Oh, I've lost a lot of fishing ground, Jim. A lot of fishing ground. Up and down the west coast there's loads of areas that have been closed off that we can't fish in now. I couldn't give you a percentage, but it's painful. It's painful to me. It's painful to the scallop stocks.
It's pain to you with no gain to anything else.
Well, I dare say there'll be plenty of happy starfish and valuable things like that, worms and stuff. Sea anemones, all these beautiful wee creatures, but they don't provide much to the economy.
Nothing.
Whereas fishing is the cornerstone of blooming coastal communities. And a lot of folk are trying to put us out of business, Well, it's not even a lot of folk. It's a small group of folk, a few small groups of individuals, opinion holders, getting paid a fortune
to put people out of work.
That's what it's like from where I'm sitting now.
Just alarming, really. It's disgraceful. Ian, who are these environmentalists you mention?
Well, people like the groups of people like Open Seas, Coast, even the Scottish Creel Fishermen's Federation. They claim to be a federation of fishermen, but as far as I know, there's only one fisherman in the group that I know of. I know many, many creel fishermen around the whole coast, and none of them are in the Scottish Creel Fishermen's Federation, nor do they support any of their views. So they're all shouting for the same things: no mobile gear, stop dredging, and
That must be quite dangerous because it's almost like infiltration.
well, yes, I think so. They're pretending that they're fishermen, but they're not. They're claiming to support 130 members or something, and they may well be, but none of these members are fishermen that we know of. They won't provide evidence of their members' names. It's
Is
just.
that not public? If it's a federation, that should be public.
Well, I don't know, Jim. I would have thought so. I mean, the likes of the Clyde Association, for example, the Scottish White Fisher Producers Organisation, all their boats are named and members are named, what have you. Why aren't theirs? It's a bit weird.
Do you feel they have an agenda?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
No.
They're no doubt getting funding from foreign lands as well, I would have thought.
Yeah. And it's quite worrying because we talked there about infiltration. It's been brought up at one or two other podcasts.
Really, Jim, I would call them a bunch of nobodies who provide nothing to the economy. They employ nobody. They're wealth takers, trying to put wealth makers and job creators out of work, Jim. That's who they are. That's what I think of them. Don't know if I mentioned that before, Jim, or not in the podcast, but that's what I think of them. And the beauty of telling the truth is you don't have to remember what you said.
Well, that's exactly correct. Ian, I would just like to finish up by thanking you very much for coming on the podcast, and because I was really keen to get the views of a scallop fisherman, and I think you've got your message across loud and clear, so thank you for that.
Well, thanks for having me, Jim, and I'll look forward to hearing it. Hopefully I didn't swear too much.